that he, looking back, he can look back and see that pattern of intentionality from his father. But he knows, like, if he has questions, if he doesn't understand something, he can always turn to his father and ask. Having that open communication, that dialogue is so important, even as an adult. uh, it it uh, it all starts as a child.
Let's impact some men today. I think we're gonna do a great job.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Modern Man Podcast, where we are here to connect men in pursuit of their potential. I encourage you to join us as we embrace discomfort, cultivate community, and put wind in each other's sails. Now, if you're ready to take your personal and professional growth to the next level, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to the podcast and leave us a rating to let us know how we're doing. Come on, y'all. I want to hear from you guys. Also, to the fellas listening, I encourage you to check out The Noble Knights. It's a group of men where you can find support, accountability, and mentorship in order to achieve your goals. Join us and become a part of a community of like-minded men on a mission to improve themselves and elevate their capacity for life. And I am excited because we're getting some wind in our sails from my guest today, founder of Voyage Rites. It is a pleasure to have Dan Smith joining us on the podcast. Dan, it's great to see
Thank
you,
you.
brother.
Thanks, you too, Ted. Appreciate you having
Absolutely.
me
And
on.
it's an absolute pleasure to have you on. I usually like to step out of the way and let the guests talk to the audience really quick, introduce themselves in their own words, give a little bit of their backstory. Because while I could say the title, the company, and what you do, it really doesn't describe what makes the man. So
Mm,
I want to
mm.
give you the podcast, give you an opportunity to speak directly to the audience, share your truth, and we could jump into the conversation after, man.
Thanks, Ted. Really appreciate you having me on. It's an absolute honor. You're doing amazing work here with your podcast, with the Noble Knights. I love to see men coming together in community. It's exactly what we need as men. A little bit about myself. I've been in law enforcement for 13 years, and I came to find out fairly recently, over the past couple of years, that it's not my passion. So I have three little boys, ages 8, 6, and 2. And a couple of years ago, I was spending some time overseas in Africa for work. And I realized that that time I stole that away from my family for my own selfish reasons. And I realized how important it was to have the father's presence in the home, especially for little boys. And I came back home, uh, apologizing to my wife and trying to help her out and regain that trust with my boys again. And I committed to not traveling again for work for that extended amount of time. Uh, in that commitment, I also committed to being a more present father, being more intentional with my time with my boys. And I had heard about this idea of rites of passage years and years ago. If you're familiar with the Order of Man podcast with Ryan Mickler,
Mhm.
uh,
Yep.
yeah, he had guests on his show talking about rites of passage, and he's mentioned it several times. So I've had the idea of, like, maybe I could do something like that one day for my boys, but the idea kept coming up, and I kept hearing about it, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to dedicate this year to trying to figure out rites of passage for my boys. And I sort of had an epiphany moment where I was reading Tim Ferriss's book, The 4 Hour Work Week, and trying to automate and delegate, eliminate different tasks in my job, and realizing it really was impossible when I'm attached to the government. And I had to, at the time I was working in New York City, and I was commuting in and out from New Jersey, and it was just sucking up so much of my time. And I realized I need to start building something out that can someday see me leaving the government work, leaving law enforcement. But I didn't know what that would look like. And then when I was reading the 4 Hour Work Week, it hit me like, the rites of passage that I'm building out currently for my boys. This is what I need to be pushing out to fathers and sons. And immediately it lit a fire in me that I really had never experienced, never felt that way about law enforcement before. uh, Knew that this was the mission that God was giving me. He was giving me a calling, and that's to get these rites of passages out to as many fathers and sons as possible, making them more affordable and accessible. There's a lot of, or not a lot, I should say, but there are some in-person events that are dubbed rites of passages that some organizations put on, and they do great work, but not everybody can afford to go to something like that. Not everybody can pay the travel costs to go to the few offerings that they have per year in select locations. So I want to put the ability to host and launch a rite of passage experience for the boy. I want the father to be able to do it on his own, and providing that to the father is my mission. And as I was mentioning before we started recording, I really have felt the call from God that this is to be a ministry. I'm to help boys understand what it means to be a man, what it means to be a reflection of Jesus Christ, and to learn about biblical masculinity, and then to culminate in a rite of passage experience. I think will make the experience all the more powerful. So that's what Voyage Rites is. That's where it came from, and I'm so pumped to be on this mission. I took my first son, or my oldest son, I should say, on his first rite of passage a few months ago, and it was an amazing experience. He's only 8 years old, but I believe that there's a crucial developmental shift that occurs at that age, and there's several developmental shifts as a boy grows and goes through his teenage years, but 8 is a really important one. He's starting to
Mm.
recognize the world around him. He's starting to realize he's older than the little children. He's starting to realize that there's boys that are older than him that know more than him. So this was me getting ahead of some of the questions that were going to come up, and this was me trying to be intentional with his path and his journey. So that's a little
Yeah.
bit about me in a nutshell.
No, it's fantastic, Dan. I love it, and it reminds me of a concept. Part of why I dubbed the Noble Knights, and I had the author Alison Armstrong a long time ago on the podcast. She had this concept of the development of men, the amazing
Mhm,
development of men, and I see it as the boys grow up as pages, and then we become knights,
mhm,
and then princes, and then eventually kings. And
mm,
the reality of the noble knights is once you become a knight, there's always an aspect of that knighthood to you. Even as a prince, even as a king, you still have the ability to be a knight, which is why I tap into the noble knights because it's the development into the men that we hope to become, and it's a process. Um, you are fired up, and I
I
could
am.
hear it in your voice. I see it in your face, and even with the work that you're doing, it shows. And this is your ministry, and I can't wait to see it echo from sea to shining sea and beyond across the pond. But why do you believe that this is so crucial in today's society? What is the fuel to that fire?
There's several things. So first, I would say with my experience in law enforcement, I used to be a police officer working the beat, and I saw firsthand the effects that fatherlessness had on society. Not just the lack of a present father, but the lack of an intentional father. There's a Most fathers like have good intentions, but they don't know what they don't know. And to me, rites of passage are something that used to be around or still is around in some different religions and ancient cultures. But thousands of years ago, almost all cultures across the world had a format and a method in their tribes that would initiate the boys into manhood. And this would provide them that guidance and that direction they need for their life. I think one of your previous guests mentioned an ancient African proverb where if a boy is not initiated, they will burn the village down just to watch it burn. So, and I think that
Mm,
you can see that happening in society today. We are, as boys, creating and latching on to these rites of passages, for lack of a better term, because we don't have a more significant one. So teenage boys, they're going to chase violence, they're going to chase drugs, they're going to chase some sort of answer to the internal question that they have: Do I have what it takes? Do Am I a man now? They're going to sleep around with as many girls as they can, try drugs, get drunk as much as they can. And it was something that I struggled with as a teenager. Looking back, I had a great father. He was amazing. He worked really hard. He provided for my family. He loved my mom. He still loves my mom to this day. They've been married for 30 plus years and raised successful children, me, two brothers, and my older sister. So he's a great father. But at the same time, he didn't know what he didn't know. So if he had the tool of a rite of passage to provide me, that would have provided my mind with the direction where that I was headed. It would have painted a clear picture of my future as a man. And that's my intention with my boys is that as they go through puberty, they experience those physical changes. Those physical changes will it tells them that, hey, I'm changing. My body's experiencing all this chaos, and something's happening. Like there's no denying it, but they have to know what their future is and what that is leading to. So their body will change, but is their mind going to change, or is it going to stay locked into boyhood, stay back in childhood? So providing them that exit out of childhood into manhood is the whole purpose of a rite of passage. And then
Mm.
simultaneously, as a father, if you use multiple rites of passage, you're creating a pattern of intentionality throughout his childhood that he'll be able to look back on the rest of his life and never have a doubt that his father was there and was intentional with making sure he knew what he needed to know to become a man.
Yeah, man, that's beautiful. And it might leave folks listening and watching right now with the question of, okay, um, man, Dan's onto something. I've seen ancient cultures initiate men, and some men listening might think of their past and identify. Well, I don't know the moment I became a man. I
Hmm.
don't remember any initiation into that. And unfortunately, what we do see is a lot of grown boys
Mm.
in their 20s perpetuating their adolescence as long as they can, clinging
Hmm.
on to that boyhood and that adolescence, the Peter Pans, if you will.
Absolutely.
Um, what what does a rite of passage look like? What is it? And let's say the right rite of passage versus the misleading cultural rites of passage that we might see today.
So I'll start with a misleading one, and this is a fairly innocent example, but well, it could lead to not being so innocent. Take fraternity culture and the hazing culture of being initiated into a fraternity. Those
Mhm,
could go really, really bad and could be very extreme at times. Just the other day, I saw a video, and this is fairly innocent, right? They're in a college dorm room hallway, and guys are lining the hall on both sides, all of them shirtless, but you got one guy at the end of the hall who's got a putter and he's putting the golf ball all the way down the hall. It lands in the hole and the whole hallway erupts, right? That almost in and of itself is like he just accomplished something and he is receiving that positive affirmation from all the men that are around him, or so to speak.
mhm,
So that's an innocent example of like something that a boy this day might chase, right? They're chasing that feeling, that positive affirmation from the other men around them. What a good rite of passage or a rite of passage would look like is a bestowing of the title of man and that positive affirmation and that initiation into manhood. You also have to provide them with that definition of what it means to be a man. Uh, for when I turned 13 years old, I thought like, oh boy, this is a big deal. I'm gonna be a teenager now. I sort of had an idea of what I was going through as far as puberty was concerned, but I thought it was going to be a big deal, but it turned out to be a major disappointment. So we went out to Why Not Pizza for dinner, and they said, "You're a teenager now." That was it. So I had no clear picture of what that meant, what my future was supposed to look like. It's something I think I really could have benefited from. It could have saved me a lot of heartache. I struggled a lot as a teenager, and providing your son that definition of what it means to a man, to be a man, to protect, to provide, to lead your family, to lead your community and those around you, to be that person that your community can look to in times of trouble. That is what we need to tell our sons they need to be. And then, like you said, it leads to men today who look like men and are old as men, at least what society says, but they behave as boys, and that's culturally accepted. To take your shirt off and chug down beers in front of everybody, like that is not the typical or not the best version of a man we need to be looking up to or providing our sons to look up to. So, um, there that definition of man is crucial, in my opinion.
mm, yeah. Um, What are some of the biggest challenges you see that boys face in today's world when it comes to understanding what it means to be a man? Like, how does that program maybe mislead them?
Uh, well, I think the biggest challenge they have are the examples of the men around them. There aren't enough examples of real men.
Mhm.
They have, whether it's their father or other men in their family or in their community, they see men who will work a 9 to 5 and come home and sit on the couch, and they will watch sports all day long, and not stand up and be intentional as a husband, as a father, as a leader. That I think is one of the things that is probably hindering some of the boys the most. And it goes back to these fathers don't understand like what they need to be doing really to positively raise their sons and escort them into manhood.
Yeah. Let's speak to the fathers really quick. And myself being a father, and I have a daughter, but God willing,
Mm,
my wife and I are not done. I very much hope to and may very much
mhm,
have a son in the future. What are the things we as fathers should be doing? Which, before I get any further in the podcast, I just want to say thank you for your service and your commitment. By the way, I don't take that for granted. What you do for us, and especially having three boys as well, 8, 6, and 2. Um,
mhm.
what can we as fathers do? How can we do a better job at initiating our boys and being that example of manhood and defining manhood for them?
Uh, it begins with not being their friend; it's being their parent. But it also it involves being intentional with every interaction that you have. For me now with my boys at such a young age, it's simply playing with them. Like it's not coming home, and although my mind is overwhelmed with my to-do list, I've got a bunch of stuff I got to take care of. I want to help my wife out as much as I can. When I am home, I still have to take that time. I have to get down on the floor, play Legos with my boys, get outside, to the typical scenario, throw the baseball, play catch. But that is what the little boys latch on to. All they want is time with their father. And I'm struggling with that now. Like I have enjoyed what I do for a living, and I've enjoyed that for almost 13 years now. But it's time for me to take that time back with my boys. It used to be in agricultural society, the father would work the farm from home, and the boys from a very, very young age would go out into the field with their father, and they would see their father work. They would learn from their father, and they would learn how to be a man by observation and by the conversations that occurred when they were out in the field working together, culminating over years and years and years. But we've lost that as a society, and it's really sad that that's the structure our society has taken, where they almost require the men to leave the home. And I think we've seen a lot of negative side effects from that, um, uh, for all kinds of different reasons.
Yeah. I mean, having fatherless homes, the numbers speak for themselves, and the statistics speak for themselves of what a fatherless home does, not just to boys, but to girls as well. And
Yes.
the unfortunate realities that can come about from that in the
Mhm.
future. So I've said it on the podcast before, and it's worth reiterating is fathers, you are important. And for
100%.
men, we put so much weight on ourselves and so much pressure on ourselves to do a good job. And while these are great tips and it's important for us to try and do better and get better, which is why I ask, hey, what can we do? But I just want to send that message out to any guys who are anxious about their performance, that showing up is the first best thing you can do. Being there, like you
Yes.
mentioned, and being intentional, spending that time. Because speaking to anyone who grew up in a fatherless home, they would have rather had an imperfect present father than the perfect father that we're trying
Mm.
to be. So if I could just lower that bar for the men who are
Mhm.
feeling the stress of being perfect, it's
Mm.
start with showing up, being present and intentional, and just go from there.
Yeah. Yeah, and I also point out it's not our job to be perfect. Like, that's our aspiration, absolutely. But if we set that standard of perfection for our boys, we will always disappoint them, for our daughters too. And that's something I included in the first rite of passage with my oldest son. Took him out a couple months ago in July for his first rite of passage, and I explained to him, that was the very first thing I said in our conversation, was that I'm not perfect. I'm gonna mess things up. You're gonna be very disappointed in me at times, but I don't want you to ever doubt my love for you and my intentionality in raising you to be a good man. So I think
Mm,
that's incredibly important, that not just we understand that we can't be perfect, but our boys need to understand too that we're not going to be perfect. We're going to screw it up,
yeah,
likely over and over again. But it's our heart that matters the most.
yeah. No, absolutely. It is our heart, and to see the transition, um, to try and set that destination for folks listening. What does it look like? What are the benefits, or maybe a success story you can share of a rites of passage, the impact that it's had on the boy and the father moving forward?
So as I'm building, I haven't gotten it out yet to some of the older kids. That's coming actually this November. I'm really excited about something I'm putting together for my church that I'm going to be getting out to as many churches as possible come January. But I'll touch on our friend Stephen Arms. Him and his family, they really had some amazing forward thinking with their grandfather instituting a rite of passage experience for all of the family, all the cousins, all the boys and the girls. And if you just look at the type of man that Stephen is, I see a direct result, a direct correlation between the experience he had as a 13-year-old boy being told and poured into by his father and the men in his family what it means to be a man. And now you see what a great guy he is. Not just a great guy, but like he is trying to also advance the idea of rites of passage. Like he's trying to get the word out. He's trying to have a positive impact on this world, and that's what we need from men. It's like
Yeah,
we need to be confident in our manhood, and we need to express that in a way that we're helping other men reach that potential.
absolutely. So I'm listening, and I'm like, man, I love what Dan and Ted are saying. This is great. I'm a father. I have maybe one, two boys. They're coming of age. And I'm
Mhm.
like, okay, my pen's running out of ink taking notes from what you're saying. You're dropping bombs, by the way, Dan. Um, what does the rite of passage look like? What does that process look like? What would be a good example on some of the practices that I would do with my boy?
Mm. So the process takes a little bit of time, and it takes some intentionality to plan something out for your son. It looks like, well, one, it needs to be you as his father. His mother, although she has great intentions, her biological role is to nurture a child. Uh, for a girl, it's different when they reach puberty, but for her son, there comes a point in time around puberty where she needs to tell her son, I have done everything I can for you to raise you through childhood. Now I'm turning you over to your father or a male mentor if there is not a father in the household. I'm turning you over to your father to learn how to be a man. And that's a a very crucial role. I'll touch on very briefly of the mother is that although it's very, very difficult and emotional for her to do it, it's extremely important in a young boy's mind because they're going to be drawn back to that childhood behavior, especially at the beginning, because that's what they all they know and what they're used to. They're going to want to turn to the mother for nurturing and comfort. Uh, like they want that pat on the back and that hug when they skin their knee, but the mother's role is to push them back to the father to learn how to be a man. So it's going to involve conversations with your son's mother. It's going to involve planning an experience to really make the moment as powerful as possible. So you should remove the boy away from the home. My advice and what I'm trying to do with all of my rites of passage is to get out in nature. There's something primal and important as human beings. what we receive from nature and being out in God's creation and God's world. And it also removes us from the comfort of home. This is what we're used to. If you put them in a situation and put them in a place that they have not been before, that just reinforces the memory aspect that they're going to take out of this. Uh,
Mm.
and I would even go so far as to have an exclusive location for each rite of passage. Like, don't go back to that location for the next rite of passage, and just have it different each time. So those are just a couple little things to start thinking about. And then when it comes to the actual rite of passage itself, you want to set apart a sacred space. Not only are you removing them from the home, but you're entering into a sacred space of transformation. Inside that space is where the initiation can occur, and then they will exit that space a different person. They will exit that space as a man, or the next version of a young boy, and then they will return home. And the return home is also significant because the mother needs to start treating them differently, especially if they've reached that initiation into as a man. She needs to start treating him like a man, and he also needs to receive additional responsibilities, not just in the house, but maybe it's time for him to get a job. This is a perfect opportunity for that. So it's not just the moment of initiation, it's the pre-planning, and it's the afterthoughts too. All of that needs to be included in it. And I know it's a lot, but that's
Mhm.
part of why I'm trying to do what I'm doing, is to provide fathers with the resources to assist and to help plan and figure out, like, okay, what does this look like for my son? Everybody's experience and life situations different. With the divorce rate so high, a lot of sons don't have their father in the home, or they're in a different location. They might live with mom and only see their dad on the weekend. So everybody's situation is different. So my goal is to try to help the fathers figure out, okay, what's going to work for you.
Yeah, and I love that you said it's so much more than just that event, the transition. It's the planning beforehand and what comes after, like
Mhm.
getting a job. I
It's
remember
huge.
I've been working since I was 14 years old, and for me, it was the pursuit of my own money. It was me wanting
Mm,
to have autonomy over my life. I wanted an Xbox. My parents couldn't afford to buy it, so I had the ability to go earn it, and then I bought my Xbox, and then I had a PlayStation, and I was able to save money, and my dad helped teach me how to start saving and putting money aside. And after I saw how fast that would grow, I started to gamify it. But those are some of
mm,
the practices that I learned at a young age that now in my mid 30s, I'm so thankful to have those habits and those foundations, because I am constantly thanking a young Ted for the choices that
mm,
he's made, because older Ted is benefiting from it.
absolutely.
And I can only imagine that some of the long-term impacts that this work can really provide. And that's coming from, just like you, present loving father. But my dad wasn't perfect, and he was very transparent about that as well. But there wasn't an initiation, there wasn't a moment of rites of passage. And if
Hmm.
anything, it was my fraternity that
Mm,
initiated that rites of passage, and
yeah.
it was boys leading boys.
Hmm.
And there, to your point, there were some negative impacts of that I had
Hmm.
to unlearn on my own.
Hmm.
Um, with that thought process, and whether it's fraternity or any other examples you could think of, what are rites of passages gone wrong, or maybe the not so beneficial rites of passages that some might prescribe to?
Yeah, fraternities is a great example. I think we long for that brotherhood as men, and that was part of my personal journey. Is was trying to find a community of men that helped me understand what it meant to be a man and helped me be secure in my own manhood. I found that through Order of Man Iron Council for quite a while, and then I moved to Apogee, which has been a phenomenal experience as well. Um, but those negative examples, it includes like chasing women. For me, it was oh, I tried a cigarette for the first time. Like, I had a very PG teenagehood, but it was there was something inside of me that I was longing for some sort of male mentorship. I was longing to understand who I was, and it manifested in itself in a lot of anger and a lot of pushing away of everybody around me. And it was a rough few years as a teenager. And if it was completely not on me coming out of that, it was 100% the Lord coming into my life and pulling me out of that, and showing me that He had a path for me, that He cared about me. Um, but other negative examples, I mean, there really are endless. If you got a teenage boy who's driving a car with a bunch of people in the car and he tries to drive fast. I've been in a lot of cars, not as the driver, but been in some pretty hairy situations as far as that's concerned. But you're trying to impress everybody around you, trying to look for that affirmation. It manifests in so many negative ways. Keg stands, uh, jumping off of houses, like crazy stuff. And I think
Yeah.
that's like as boys, we are uh, pushed to do that, not just in our own minds, but the other boys around us. Like we don't understand as boys, it's boys leading boys. It's never gonna manifest in a good way. So that's where the men have to step up. That's where the fathers need to step up and provide
Yeah.
that good initiation.
No, I agree wholeheartedly, and
Hmm.
I'm not gonna tell on myself. I won't tell any of the stories,
Hmm.
but I remember at a good friend of mine's wedding, yeah, we're at the reception, and I'm talking to his dad, and we had a couple, and he looked at me and he said, "You know, you and your buddy, you guys made me nervous a little bit, but you figured it out, and I'm really proud of you." But he wasn't wrong because he was there
Hmm.
when we were chasing the affirmation of other boys, and not only is that a a bottomless pit to chase, it's also a dangerous, life-threatening pit to chase, unfortunately, that we see of us trying to up the ante, outdo each other, get the
Hmm.
affirmation. I can do this. Look how
Yep.
brave I am.
It reminds
And to
me
what end?
It reminds me of a quote by Tim Kennedy. He says, a group of three or more 12 to 14-year-old boys with nothing to do is the most dangerous thing on this planet." It really
Exactly.
is. It really is.
Exactly. Um, and and that is why this is so important because we do need the fathers back in the home. We need those examples, and we need um
Yeah.
some good men who can pour into the young boys and teach them more in terms of how to move forward. And one thing you mentioned was the importance of community and
Mhm.
the intentionality and the efforts that happen beyond the rites of passage.
Mhm.
Um, Really quick before we touch on the community, I don't want to forget you mentioned your first rites of passage for your son, 8.
If iron sharpens iron, so does one man sharpen another. But if you're a man and you're alone or listening to this, then who sharpens you? What's going on, guys? Ted Payton here, host of the Modern Man podcast, also founder of the Noble Knights Mastermind Group. And I'm just out here encouraging you to find your circle. Maybe you're on a personal growth journey and nobody around you understands the new mentality that you're possessing. That's okay. You can find an online community that will pour into you, will navigate your goals and navigate your obstacles, share their experiences, resources, and more. Join the Noble Knights Mastermind Group and try us out for free to tap into a community of men helping each other scale up and reach their goals.
Check out themodernmanpodcast.com.
Yeah.
What are those developmental levels from 8, 13 into teenage years that
Mhm.
parents should be aware of and pay attention to as an opportunity and a time to maybe introduce these
Yes,
rites of
absolutely.
passages?
So, 8 years old is pretty huge. They're starting to realize that, hey, I'm older than these other kids, and these kids are behaving in a manner that is more childish. And
Mhm.
as an 8-year-old, realizing that I'm starting to become a little bit above that. And then they're also noticing that there are boys above them that they're looking to. So there's that developmental shift that occurs around that age. It might be a little different each boy, but that 7 to 9, 8 years old is a crucial time. And then puberty is really probably the biggest and most important time to really focus in on that rite of passage experience, because there's so many changes occurring or have occurred in their body physically. So they know without a doubt that something is going on. Something is changing. Their future is now starting to look different, but they don't know what that is. There's hormones and chaos raging on inside their minds. And it's the perfect time to jump in and say, look, this is what's going on. This is what your future looks like as a man. 16 is another huge one. And then 18, I believe that's when society has said, like, we become an adult. So 18 is a good time to recognize that shift, to like initiate them as a man. But it really just depends on the boy. I think anytime between 13 and 18, if your son's ready for that initiation, you need to provide that to him. Um,
Mhm.
our frontal lobes stop developing at 25, so there's really growth that continues to occur. So even at 25, if you're a father and you want to provide an experience to your son, if he's willing to go along with you, uh, all, any son could benefit from that. So
Oh yeah.
so the specific stages that I am targeting is that 8 years old, 13, 16, and 18. So a pattern of 4 rites of passage throughout their childhood, so that they can have 8 years old is the foundation. That's where I'm setting up like what that definition of manhood is. You're still in your childhood, but hey, look, things are starting to look a little different. So when you're ready, we're gonna start learning about this stuff. 13 years old, huge, as I just mentioned, and then continuing that pattern of intentionality through 16 and then culminating at 18, uh in the grandest kind of celebration that I could think of, with men walking alongside them and providing those positive affirmations of, you have done a great job, you've uh grown so much, and we're proud of you, I'm proud of you as your father, and bestow on them the title of man in front of a room of their peers, a room of their family, so that there's no doubt in their mind, what their life is, and what the voyage is that is in front of them.
Yeah, that's beautiful, and I try not to get emotional thinking about it because everything you've said. My dad has been a silent guide for so long in my life, so much so when I first moved away from home, 750 miles away, he gave me a stack of papers, and they're still in my nightstand, and there were different encyclopedia excerpts, different research studies, just ways to view the world, things that he's learned along the way. But one of the papers that I keep near and dear, it's my favorite poem. It's the If poem by Rudyard Kipling. I'm sure you might be familiar with it.
Oh, it's such a beautiful
Um,
poem.
and it's it's one of the things we're reading that it for me. My dad, he's 82 years old. He comes from a time where men didn't say as much, and that
Mhm.
poem, him giving that to me,
Oh,
um,
wow.
said it all. And
Mm.
I read it and I feel as though it's the words directly from him, and the last word saying, "Yours is the earth and everything that's in it." And I don't mean that in a conceited, "it belongs to me" way. I mean that in a responsibility, take
Absolutely.
care of it way. And and even to this day, I'm blessed to still have him in my life. I called my dad last week, just for counsel. Hey, Dad, you know, I'm I'm thinking about some things and r- running this through my mind, seeing
Mhm.
how you see it, and we just got to talk about, hey, well, have you considered it this way? And I was really thankful for those
That's
insights. So,
amazing.
um, I do believe what you're saying
Mhm.
is this also sets up that relationship
Absolutely.
for that
Absolutely.
perpetuate even forward.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's never a doubt in the son's mind, even as he goes through adulthood, that he, looking back, one, he can look back and see that pattern of intentionality from his father. But he knows, like, if he has questions, if he doesn't understand something, he can always turn to his father and ask. Having that open communication, that dialogue is so important, even as an adult. Uh, it
Mhm.
it uh, it all starts as a child.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How can the women in our lives benefit from this? Because, hey,
Mm.
about 13 to 15% of my audience is women. Shout out
Yeah.
to the ladies who listen to the Modern Man podcast. We see you. But we could talk about the rites of passage and the
Mhm.
importance we need for the boys, and how does the world benefit from this, and how do women, our wives, our daughters, our mothers,
Mhm.
and the women in our lives, our
Mhm.
coworkers, how do they benefit from these rites of passages?
Well, one, you're not gonna have as many males pretending to be men, men who are really still boys mentally, uh, and who are trying to do everything they can to achieve that affirmation from a female, from somebody they're in a relationship with. And that can have devastating consequences on a relationship. If a man is not secure in who he is as a man, there's a good possibility that he might still be a mama's boy inside his head. Like he, if his father was not very intentional, was very removed, not present, then he never had that break from the feminine. So he is constantly going to be searching that, and for lack of a better way of describing it, the woman that he's seeking to have a relationship with, he's really looking to be mothered. And
Mm.
if he doesn't have that break from the feminine at that young age, as we mentioned earlier, he's going to continue to have that in the back of his mind subconsciously, and it's going to have negative effects, to put it lightly, on a relationship. The men in this world need to understand what it means to be a man, and then so there's that side effect. But if we have boys that have been initiated, then they're going to be able to treat a woman the way she needs to be treated, while also being secure in their manhood. And that's only going to have a whole world of positive benefits, not just in relationships, but on our society. And it's huge.
Yeah. Amen, brother. Amen. Dan, I want to make sure that our audience can reach out, connect with you,
Mhm.
get the resources that you've created with Voyage Rites, and really the work that you're doing, the community you'll be rolling out. Um, how can folks get those links?
So the first place I would recommend going to is our website, voyagerites.com. The rights is spelled RITES. So on that website, we've got a link to our online community, the Voyagers, and inside that community, we have monthly Q and A's where it's supporting the fathers who are building out these rites of passages for their sons. We also have two programs; they're downloadable PDFs. One is the foundation, the rite of passage I did for my 8-year-old son, and the second is the initiation, and that's the rite of passage at 13 years old, which I wanted to get those two done and up on the website first because 13 I think is the most important. But really starting that pattern of intentionality at 8 is where guys need to begin. And I would also caveat saying that if your son is 10 or if he's 14, you can still do the foundational experience. It's a simple process. It's a simple rite of passage, but it begins that pattern. And then you could follow up the next weekend with the initiation, and let's just pound it into them.
Yeah.
So the website's voyagerights.com. I'm on social media. I've got Instagram, Voyage Rights, and Facebook. So you can find me there. I'm really excited for what I'm doing for my church. This month, I'm launching a small group for fathers and sons, and it lays out the definition of what being a man is and what biblical masculinity looks like, and then it's going to culminate in a rite of passage experience. So next year, keep an eye out in January. That curriculum I'm gonna be pushing that out to churches and providing that to them. Very everything's at a very low price point. My mission is to make this one, I want to achieve sovereignty for myself and my family and be able to support my family. But my number one goal is to get this out to as many fathers and sons as possible. This is something that we desperately need back in our society. So I'd be honored if anybody would check it out. I hope it can provide you with I can be providing you with a resource that you can use for you and your son. And if anybody has any questions at all about rites of passage, I could talk about this stuff all day. So
Yeah.
would love to chat more if anybody reaches out. I'll be more than happy to chat.
Keep that fire burning, brother. Keep
Yes,
that
sir.
fire burning. And I don't want to forget about the community aspect. That was the question
Yes.
I did want to ask about. What is the importance of community for the fathers and even for the boys after their initiation? How does community play a role in the perpetuated success moving forward?
Well, a lie we often tell ourselves is that we're in this alone. That was a lie I told myself for years. The struggles that I had, the struggles that I dealt with on a day to day basis, I thought it was just me. And when I realized that being in a community of other men who are seeking to become better fathers, better husbands, better leaders, I realized that I was not alone. and that these men were going to support me with the unconditional love that I needed from the men in the community. And it's something that I'm incorporating into the rites of passage too. The initiation, like you're going to pull in uncles, grandfathers, other male mentors to help pour into your son. The 16-year-old rite of passage, you're like the one I'm designing is you're going to go on the rite of passage experience with another father and son, and then those two boys will have that structure. They're going to begin to be forming their own community that from a very young age as they grow older. It's just it's something that's ingrained in us, and I think it's been kind of lost too on society, that aspect of community. And people are starting to realize that that's what we need. A lot of men are starting to realize that what you've got going with Noble Knights, it's a beautiful thing. It's exactly what we need.
Absolutely. And that's why having men like you on this podcast fills me up. It fuels me up because, this isn't a mission I'm doing alone. And
Mhm.
there is no competition in this mission for me, in my perspective. It's abundance because
Absolutely.
listeners might have been listening to the Modern Man podcast. They say, Ted's cool, but something you said really resonated with them. I'm not offended if you love Dan's message. I'm actually energized by that because that is the mission of this podcast, connecting men in pursuit of their potential. So for anyone who's
Yes.
resonated with your message, Dan, I'm here for it, and I'm all about perpetuating that and pushing it even forward. Last question I ask it, and it's something tells me it could be relative to rites of passage, or if it's something we haven't touched on in the episode, that's fine too. But what is something that you've seen or something that's happened to you that shapes the way you view the world as a man?
Oh wow, what a good question. Uh, I'll touch on I think I mentioned it once. The experience I had in Africa. I spent 3 months in Africa for work. I was working in an embassy over there, and it showed me the importance of being a present father. But it also showed me that my own ambition did not outweigh the ambition of my family. So the ambition that I had for work, it was a great for my job. Like I had a great experience over there. I loved the work. Um, great for my resume, but it really showed me that uh, that that part of my life did not matter as much as my family, and being a good husband, being a better father for my boys. Um, and it didn't provide me with the community I needed. I needed to be home looking for that community, not elsewhere. Um, so I think that I hope that answers your question.
It absolutely does, and I
Good.
think a lot of men can resonate with the answer. But founder of Voyage Rites, Dan Smith, thank you so much for being on, man. Thank you for your mission and your ministry.
Thank you, Ted. It's been an honor. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. And I'm going to recap some of the gems you left along the way, because I know a lot of listeners are either working out, driving, or cleaning the house while listening. But the father's presence in the home, it is absolutely pivotal and important.
Mm.
Men listening, that if you're a father, you're present and you're in the home. The research is clear on this. Your kids fare better when you are there. We don't know what we don't know, and we are not perfect, and it is important for us to understand that, articulate that, but still have the intention of doing the best we can, showing up with love and intentionality. Positive male affirmation. That's what so many boys are looking for. However, it could be dangerous if the positive male affirmation is coming from other boys, especially if it's not properly aimed and directed, and if that manhood is not defined in a clear, distinct way. There aren't enough examples of real men. And a lot of you listening, you guys are the examples. If you're listening to the Modern Man podcast, if you prescribe to this, if you rock with me, if you rock with Dan, you are the type of men we need in this world. And I'm encouraging you to keep showing up and echo yourself. What we do in life echoes eternity. One of my favorite movies, Gladiator. Can't
Yes.
can't get away from that. It's fantastic. But you are the examples in your worlds, men, in your homes, in your communities, in your churches. How you show up matters. And that is why your intentionality is so important. Um, be a positive impact on this world. Um, Man, you have the gift of creating yourself into an immense resource and an immense tool for the world. Make sure it's a positive resource and a positive tool. Um, and understanding that you can make a moment powerful in that rites of passage. Go into nature, make it a sacred place. We long for that brotherhood, and when we seek that male affirmation, when you make it memorable and you give the definition, you make that moment something that could echo into that young boy's future. And then
Mm,
boys leading boys, watch out, understanding the importance of laying out the path for those young boys to become men. The age is 8 years old, then in through puberty, then at 16 and into 18, where the world says you are now a man. It's important to lean into them in those four stages, those four rites of passages. And the frontal lobe does not stop developing until 25. So if these boys will still run with you, men, take them with you, guide them through this life. Of course, any son can benefit from that, and so can our daughters, our mothers, our wives, sisters, and the world. Guys, thank you again for making it to the end. It's been a pleasure having you rock with us all the way. Thank you to Dan. Thank you to the audience. I'm going to ask that you do me a favor. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and share this with somebody that you know can get benefit as well from these episodes. I'm also going to encourage you to leave us a rating to let us know how we're doing. It's the only way we improve. I'm not afraid to take feedback, so you can be honest with that rating. And of course, as I always say at the end of the episode, guys, everybody wants the sunshine, but they don't want the rain. But you can't get the pleasure without first the pain. Let's grow.